Daniel, this is Diana.
Hey, Diana.
Hi there. Could you tell me who of the attendees am I promoting to panelist?
Yeah, could you promote Dr. Larry Norris? That's in the attendees, and then we might have Deshane Barnett or somebody from the health department coming as well.
All right, I will.
Thank you.
Stacy, this is Diana. I am ready when you are.
Good morning, Diana. Okay. I do see Deshane in the audience. If you want to promote him, that would be great. I don't know if the Kim White who is in attendance is the Kim White from the county. If she is here to present.
I don't believe so, or maybe, yeah, because I just talked to Kirsten Paps this morning, and she said that nobody from the county was able to attend today.
Well, I don't think she's from the county attorney's office.
Kim, do you hear us? Kim?
Does look like they have their, they had their mic on. Let me unmute for a second. Okay, well, Kim, are you able to speak? Can we hear you? Okay. Does seem like having some technical difficulties, so we'll move on from there. Okay, I'm actually going to call, because we have a busy committee schedule today, call today's Public Safety and Health Committee meeting to order. Today is June 15th. We are still meeting virtually. I know that this, some of the topics on this agenda item has gotten a little bit of attention, so I just want to remind everybody on how to best to continue to engage with us while we're in this virtual format. And the best way to do that is to visit the Missoula our website at www.ci.missoula.mt.us/webcast. That's the best way to see what is upcoming in our agendas, as well as an opportunity to leave comments on items that are upcoming or public hearings that are open. You can also click there to leave a comment on things that will be added to the record. There's also a way to send an email that goes out to all members of council. And the best way to do that is to send it to council@ci.missoula.mt.us. If you also don't want to use any of those formats, you can always call and leave a voicemail. And that number is 406-552-6012. That gets digitized and sent out to all members of council. So we want to, even though we're still meeting virtually, to give plenty of ways for the community to provide feedback, engagement with council members, since we're not having in-person meetings. So for today, for those folks who are participating in the meeting and want to provide comment when comment portions are called, please do the signal your interest in responding by pressing *9, and we'll call on you, and there'll be a couple different points in the agenda to provide feedback. With all of that, we'll get started. Diana, can you do a roll call, please?
Starting roll call, Stacy Anderson.
Present.
Merita Becerra.
Present.
Daniel Carlino.
Present.
John Contos.
Here.
Jordan Hess. Gwen Jones.
Present.
Kristen Jordan.
Present.
Mike Nugent.
Present.
Jennifer Savage.
Present.
Amber Sherrill. Sandra Vizika.
Present.
Heidi West.
Present.
Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks so much, everybody. Okay, so we have all right, before we get to our agenda, we have approval of the minutes from our last meeting, which was June 8th. Are there any changes to those minutes? Seeing none, those will stand approved. All right, so right now I'm going to call for public comment on items that are not on the agenda, but are under the purview of the Public Safety and Health and Operations Committee. So if you would like to provide public comment under those guidelines, please raise your hand. I see Jonathan Peebleson. He's had his hand raised, but he took it down because I thought he was waiting to comment. So anybody want to make comment on non-agenda items? Great. Seeing none, we'll move to the business portion of our committee agenda. So we have two items. The first one is going to be a presentation on a resolution supporting ethnogenic plants practices. And then we will have a presentation on the reentry challenges for citizens returning back to our community. We have an hour an hour and 25 minutes for today left, and want to give time for the sponsors of the resolution on ethnogenetic plants to speak. And then we also have Police Chief Jason White here, who's going to speak on this. We also have Deshane Barnett, who is here from the Health Department, who's going to speak on this, and also answer any questions. And then Jim Nugent from the City Attorney's Office, I think, is also going to speak on this, and then we'll answer any questions. So if we spend about an hour on the first item, that gives us 25 minutes for the reentry program presentation, and I will try to do my best to manage time so that we get through both of these substantive things today. So with that, I'm going to turn over the presentation for the resolution supporting ethnogenic plants to the resolution sponsor, Daniel Carlino.
Thanks. Yeah, I'm gonna share my screen. Dr. Norris and I are gonna give a quick 15-minute presentation, and then move on to the next speakers. So let me just pull this up here. All right, so can everybody see that pretty clear? Great. So yeah, I just want to start by saying that ethnogenic plants have been used for thousands of years in religious, spiritual, medical practices. And up until about 50 years ago in the United States, the war on drugs just started about 50 years ago, and with the Nixon administration. And I just believe that drug policy should never have been viewed as a criminal issue. It's a health issue. And I think that we need to address it in a humane way rather than kicking people while they're down. And I'm also here today to present on this because it's a grassroots effort from many Missoulians. We have gotten more comments in support of this than anything else this entire year since the new council people have come on board. We've heard comments in support of this resolution from veterans who have had experience with this in treating PTSD. We've heard comments in support from therapists, doctors, and dozens of community members. So I just want to emphasize that this is a grassroots resolution, and more constituents have asked us to pass this than anything else that we voted on this year. And I will hand it over to Dr. Norris to talk about the medical benefits, and I will talk about how this relates to our JEDI resolution and how this relates to trying to work towards humane drug policy in the future.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Carlino, and appreciate your leadership on this issue. Thank you to the City Council for meeting us today. This is very important. I think this is an issue that every community should have a stake in. I know that the 10th Amendment allows for the city and states to pay attention to the health benefits for their community. So this is something that definitely falls within that purview. Today we're talking about entheogens. Entheogens are what the primary focus is for this resolution, and entheogens, as we define them, are basically natural plants and mushrooms. Different than psychedelics, which would be synthetics. This would be natural plants and mushrooms, specifically focusing on indoamines, tryptamines, and phenethylamines. These are serotonin-based substances. Unlike dopamine-based substances, which have addictive qualities to them, these are not addictive at all and actually can help with addiction. So these are very powerful plants that have been used, as Councilmember Carlino said a minute ago, across the world for millennia, for centuries in some cultures. And those plants on the bottom are basically what we're talking about, the plants and mushrooms there. So we have the cacti containing mescaline, we have mushrooms containing psilocybin, we have plant combinations similar to ayahuasca that contain DMT, and we have plants that contain Ibogaine. And we'll speak a little bit about those in the next couple slides. Oh, could you just rewind just 1 second there? Yep, and then so basically we're looking at entheogens. The benefits of these entheogens include psychological and physical wellness. They support and enhance religious and spiritual practices, and they, most importantly, reestablish humans' unalienable and direct relationship to nature. We see this as a human rights issue as much as anything else. And next slide, please. Thank you. Some really interesting studies that have been happening over the years based upon physical health. So we often hear about entheogens being beneficial for psychological or mental health and well-being, but this also can be really beneficial for physical health. There's a couple of slides that I don't have on here at the moment, but I'm just saying article headlines, but including helping with diabetes, for example, with one of the ayahuasca constituents. So there's a lot of different things outside of this, but I think the two most primary ones that I'd like to focus on are neuroplasticity. So they're finding that psychedelics can be beneficial for helping to regrow neural networks. And this can be beneficial for Parkinson's and Alzheimer's and things like that. They find that actually it can help regrow these synapses. And then the next one down here, I think, is really, really important. It's not something that's,
sorry,
no problem. Not something that's really been focused on too much, but I think for people that are suffering from cluster headaches, this is significant. I've talked to many people anecdotally. There's a lot of studies as well that find that cluster headaches are really intense headaches. Sometimes they're called suicide headaches, really intense pain for folks. They have no way out. There's nothing in the medical community right now that can help them with that. But people are finding that psychedelics, hallucinogens, entheogens, as the hallucinogen says here, but entheogens, what we're speaking to, can be really helpful for helping to help people with their cluster headaches, and actually gives them reprieve for 6 months to a year to forever. So I've had a lot of really, really, really thankful people that are talking to us about this research because they say, hey, this helped me and I was ready to commit suicide after this. Next slide. One thing that's also really impressive about this work is that they're finding that it's really beneficial for recidivism, crime reduction, and intimate partner violence and reduction of all those. So we have a study here on the top corner here that looks at intimate partner violence and reduction with that. We found that the bottom two there are showing that recidivism has decreased pretty dramatically for people that have worked with entheogens or psychedelics. And actually there is some work being done in Brazil, which has stopped recently, but they were actually using through the Santo Daime Church, ayahuasca in the prison population, and they're finding incredible results, people having great, incredible personal and spiritual growth, lots of healing and reduction of recidivism as well. So this has been really powerful for that area of concern. The next slide, please. This is probably one of the most significant issues, especially right now. We're seeing this come up a lot with some of the COVID issues, lots of substance use issues that are happening all across the US right now, increases in depression, anxiety, substance use issues, et cetera. One of the specific materials that we're talking about, Ibogaine, has an incredible ability to help with substance use issues, specifically opioid issues. So heroin, opioids, and things like that. They found that I think right now we're looking at about, on the general results, 38 to 50% success rate for people to completely stop using substances in terms of opioids. They are assuming that once we move this forward in the future and we have a better sort of framework around this, we'll actually be able to have even better results. Just as a reference point, current treatment for opioid addiction is around 10 to 12%, where people will go back afterwards. And this is about 30 to 50%. What it does is it not only allows for people to go into the psycho-emotional and psycho-spiritual and revisit the trauma. And as one of my friends said, with the emotion volume turned down, which sort of helps to relieve some of that trauma, but it also gives people a window of opportunity of about 5 to 10 days where they don't have any withdrawals or any cravings. And for folks that I know that have been dealing with substance use issues, they say that's the hardest part of quitting, is that they try and quit and it's just too painful, it's too much, they can't do it. So this actually allows a window of opportunity for people to make it through that. As you see there, it's both for opioid, but we're also looking at cocaine, tobacco use and things of that nature. So this is really, really groundbreaking research, and we're excited to see how this moves forward. Next slide, please. Another thing too that's coming out right now, and this is actually what some of the Fda trials are looking at, is for treatment-resistant depression. So you see here we have some psilocybin-assisted therapy. That would be something that comes from the mushrooms. Treatment-resistant depression on the first two on the left side there, and then actually looking at end-of-life anxiety and depression related to terminal illness. And they're finding amazing work at Johns Hopkins and NYU and UCLA to show that people that are sort of at their end, they don't know what to do. Their biggest concern, their biggest anxiety is what happens after I pass away. What happens as I get closer to, the death process. And this has been really, really, really helpful for people to sort of alleviate that. And then they say that they actually are able to live each day a little bit better. So it doesn't actually, obviously doesn't stop the terminal illness, but it does alleviate and give those moments of time after the treatment to be able to really fully be embodied in their daily practices. They're able to reconnect with their family in different ways. They're able to heal things with their family. So this has been really impressive, this work here. This is what the current Fda trials are looking at. Fda trials, however, take a long time. They're pretty expensive. When people are actually, able to get this treatment, it's going to be, thousands of dollars, and that isn't accessible to everybody, unfortunately. Also, this obviously takes a long time to implement. And what we're really trying to do here is to make sure that everyone can have access. We know that the value of these materials are there. We just want to make sure that everyone can access it and not have to be necessarily dependent upon a pharmaceutical company, but they can grow their own plants or they can grow their own mushrooms. And I think this is important for the next slide, where we actually had a Johns Hopkins studies that said, you don't actually, this can be beneficial for people even without sickness or pathologies or mental health illness. This is for what they called healthy normals. So they found that in these studies on healthy normals, that this was some of the experiences from mushrooms and other things were some of the most personal, had some of the most sustained personal meaning and spiritual significance, some of the top 5 most important experiences in their life, according to some of the people. And this ranks up against, marriage and having children. It's really powerful experiences, really mind expanding, really healing for individuals, personal and spiritual growth. And I think this is what's important, is we don't need to, give someone a lifetime diagnosis for treatment-resistant depression or to have these experiences, these can be beneficial even for people who don't have any kind of mental health issues at all. And I think that's really important as we look into the personal sovereignty and the self-agency of healing in this process. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. And yeah, now I can, thanks, Larry,
Yeah.
for all the talk about the neuroscience. And I know Dr. Norris will be here to answer questions too about that, if anybody has any questions at the end of the presentation. Now I'm going to talk a few slides about working towards humane drug policy. And this first slide, you can see that the United States is #1 in the world for people incarcerated per capita. And that we used to not be the #1 in the world. That started after the war on drugs started in the United States, where people are being arrested for nonviolent crimes that only involve them and their body. And we are now the #1 in the world for people incarcerated. And I think that's a really sad statistic. And I think, we can do better than that in our country. So this resolution today is one small step towards looking at how we can not be #1 in the world for people incarcerated, and try to start chipping away at those nonviolent, victimless crimes that have been punished for the past handful of decades. And arrests for ethnogenic plants have made it harder for Missoulians to find secure employment, to find secure, affordable housing options, and to receive non-biased information when they're filling out applications. I'm sure Benny will talk to you all more about this after this item is done, but it is incredibly hard for somebody to get their basic needs met when our criminal justice system and our laws that us as lawmakers are doing are to push them down. So we need to create laws that make it easier for people to find employment, easier for people to find housing, and to make it to where people don't have to have biased information because of the law. And I want to look at the racial disparities in marijuana arrests. We don't have enough data from our police department to have local data on ethnogens in particular, but drug arrests of all kinds have disproportionately impacted people of color and in the United States. And in Montana, we actually ranked #1 for the states in the entire nation for the disproportionate number of Black people being arrested compared to white people for marijuana use, even though Black people and white people use marijuana at the same rates. Black people in Montana were 9.6 times more likely to be arrested for marijuana. And this is from a study from the ACLU over 10 years. And again, it makes it harder for those people to then find secure jobs and employment. And in Missoula, we're actually the 3rd worst county in the state, also arrest for drug racial disparities in arrests, with 11.5% more likely to be arrested in Missoula County for marijuana possession than if you were Black than if you were white, even though Black and white Missoulians are using marijuana at similar rates. And not only does this relate to our JEDI resolution with race, but also with people of low income, are the people that are going to end up sitting in jail, is because you either can't make your bail, you just don't have money to make bail, or you don't have the money to hire a nice lawyer. And the truth is that people who are lower income that are arrested for ethnogenic plants are the people that are going to actually do jail time. If you are wealthy, you're very unlikely to actually see jail time for this. But besides, the first few hours, then you can pay up bail, and then you can hire a fancy lawyer and be okay. But these current laws are punishing people that are low income and people of color way disproportionately more than wealthy people or white people in the United States. And I think that's really important for us to think about and let that set in, and think about how our policies are disproportionately harming the most vulnerable populations currently. And then I could pass it back to Dr. Norris to talk about how this has been going across the country.
Yes, thank you, Councilmember Carlino. Yes, this movement started in Oakland in 2019. We just had our third year anniversary. June 5th was when it passed unanimously here in Oakland. This also was passed in Denver, Colorado, but they did just mushrooms. And then as you see here, Santa Cruz, Ann Arbor, Washtenaw County. So the county that Ann Arbor is in, the DA there decided to expand that for the entire county. Washington, DC voted on this. They had a 76% voter approval, which is kind of off the charts when you think about voting issues right now. Detroit, Michigan had a 61% voter approval, also really impressive. Then we had Somerville, Cambridge, Northampton, and East Hampton, Massachusetts that have all passed. Seattle, Washington has passed. Arcata, California, Port Townsend, and Hazel Park, Michigan. What's really impressive about this movement is that there's communities in every one of these cities that are, have had personal experiences of transformation, of personal and spiritual growth, of healing, and they're all willing to come forward to the city council to say, hey, what can we do to help our community out? What can we do to make sure that there's alternative models of healing for us that don't necessarily, require high costs or, regulatory frameworks that most people can't fit into. As you see there on the map, we also have about 50 other cities that are currently active, working to decriminalize in their city. We're working with state legislation in Michigan and Colorado, working with some folks in Vermont for state legislation as well, and for some in California. So this has been a pretty impressive movement in just 3 years pandemic. For this to all be happening is amazing. And then we can slip to the next slide. And in those last 3 years, it's been, pretty clear that there's not a lot of harm to this policy passing. Here in Oakland, we've had 0 reports of emergencies or increases in criminal activity. In fact, just the opposite. We've had a lot of anecdotal, we haven't done the public health research on this yet, but a lot of anecdotal reports about personal and spiritual growth, of healing, people being able to get through traumas and things like that. So this is actually working in these different cities, which is amazing. Here's a little study here that is done, it was done out of Denver, and they agree with the same thing. There's been no significant negative impacts on public safety by decriminalizing. It's not created any significant issues at all in the city. So that's really important as we look forward. This is something that's relatively safe. And what's important too about this is that each one of these cities, including the incredible community in Missoula, are creating local support systems, local educational frameworks, and I'm sure you'll hear from some of the folks later about what they're doing. But this is really important as well, and you have the large community there that's really helping out the community to figure this out. Okay, go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, and we all have the copy of the resolution, but just in summary, what we're asking for in the resolution is to not spend money or resources or time locally as a city on arresting people for ethnogenic growing, gathering, or gifting, and to continue. It's already not a funding priority for the city, and we make it clear in the resolution, and I'm sure Chief White will talk to how it's not a funding priority currently. So we just want to keep it like that and not have any funds or resources going towards arresting people for ethnogenic plant practices. And we just want to give a copy to the county attorney who typically deals with these arrests. Obviously, we don't have control over what the county attorney does, but just making sure that the new county attorneys are aware of this resolution if passed. And then we also want to instruct our city's lobbyists to support this at the state level when it comes up. I know that there's definitely talk of this happening at the state level in Montana next legislative session. And I think it would be helpful for when that time comes to also have our city lobbyist support as well. And thank you everybody for listening, and thank you for taking the time to read those 60, 70 plus emails from our constituents that have been asking us to support this, and taking the time to read through the science and logical thinking about this rather than looking 50 years into the past of the current policy. And lastly, I just want to also just say that although in the 1970s, the Nixon administration tried to make it illegal for ethnogenic plant use, the FDA currently is also trying to fast track this to make it to where ethnogens can be used across the country for therapeutic reasons and medical benefits. And I can be done with our presentation there and pass it on to anybody else who'd like to speak or have questions.
Great, thanks for that, Councilmember Carlino and Dr. Norris. Next, for our speak, I guess we hadn't really figured out from the police chief and the whose order of operations is speaking. So I'll tee up Jason White, our Missoula Police Chief, and then we'll have Deshane Barnett, and then finally Jim Nugent, and then we will go to questions from council members.
Thank you. I'm Jason White, Chief of Police with the Missoula Police Department. The Missoula Police Department opposes this resolution. Entheogenic plants are classified as federal Schedule 1 drugs because of their hallucinogenic properties. They are also defined in state law as a dangerous drug in section 5032-101 of the MCA. From January 1st, 2020 to April 21, 2022, we have investigated 20 cases involving entheogenic drugs. Out of those cases, 3 involved possession of only an entheogenic substance. The remaining cases involved additional drugs. This resolution contains flaws that will impact our ability to enforce other drug laws and lead to unintended consequences. The provision that the city, quote, shall not use any funds or resources to assist in the enforcement of laws for the use and possession of entheogenic plants by adults as a standalone offense, end quote, could jeopardize the $300,000 in federal funding we receive annually to run the Missoula Drug Task Force HIDA operation. This prohibition would prevent the personnel assigned to this task force from assisting our county, state, and federal partners under the conditions of this resolution. It could also jeopardize the long-term working relationships we have with our partner agencies. The potential loss of funding and working relationships could impact our ability to maintain a productive and functional drug task force. The resolution does not set a cap on the quantity of entheogenic substance that may be possessed. An individual with a large quantity of entheogenic substance would be treated the same as an individual with a single dose. The language of this resolution would also prohibit the Missoula Police Department from enforcing criminal possession with the intent to distribute pursuant to 45-9-103 of the MCA, or criminal distribution of dangerous drugs pursuant to 45-109 of the MCA, because the language of the resolution only references that it does not apply to, quote, commercial sales or manufacturing, end quote. The language of the resolution that it does not apply to possession of or distributing these materials in schools, end quote, is not in alignment with Montana state law and could lead to enforcement issues in and around school campuses. Section 45-9-109 of the MCA, criminal distribution of dangerous drugs on or near school property, defines a school area as, quote, in, on, or within 1,000 feet of real property of the school. The explicit language of this resolution states it does not apply, quote, in schools. Therefore, the Missoula Police Department would be prohibited from enforcing the possession laws if the violation happened, quote, on or within 1,000 feet, end quote, of the school. Missoula is experiencing public safety issues involving methamphetamine, opioids, and fentanyl like we haven't experienced in the past. The overwhelming majority of the cases we investigate involving entheogenic substances involve multiple dangerous substances, including methamphetamine, opioids, and fentanyl. If this resolution passes and the first substance we encounter in our investigation is entheogenic, our investigation must end. The consequence is that other drugs will remain in our community and continue to pose a public safety threat. For these reasons, the Missoula Police Department cannot support this resolution. Thank you.
Great, thank you for that, Chief White. So we'll have all our speakers go and then open up for questions. So next up, we have Deshane Barnett from the Missoula City County Health Department.
Hi, apologize all for 2 things. One, my internet has been notoriously unstable today. I don't know why. Was on meetings yesterday and it was fine, but today it is not doing well. So a large portion of the presentation cut out. Second, I didn't actually come prepared to speak. I just came prepared to answer questions, especially as they arise and pertain to public health. What I will say is that this topic, this is a rapidly changing area of clinical study, and there's reasons for that. There are reasons that this was not well studied over the last 50 years, and it's just beginning to become well studied. But what I need to say is that the health department, through the Board of Health, does not have an official position on this issue. So when I'm here today and answering questions, I'm only speaking for myself. I am not speaking on behalf of the Board of Health or the Health Department. We have not adopted an official position on this at this time. What I know of this topic, it does relate to, you know, my research area of focus, and based on the available evidence in public health, we cannot say that there are no public health benefits associated with entheogenic plants, but we also cannot say that there are no public health risks or concerns. And I want to make sure that, you know, that message is clear, is that, you know, when it comes to this topic in public health, there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. This is not cut and dry, that this either absolutely is 100% beneficial or it's 100% horrible. That's not the state of the science right now in public health. And based on that, really what I would ask is that if the Missoula City moves forward not putting efforts to decriminalize entheogenic plants, how would we then ensure that enforcement is not disadvantaging marginalized community members, as we know happens? I would want to see an answer to that, just as if we do move forward with decriminalization, what policies and protocols will be enacted to confront potential increases in problem substance use, especially my biggest concern would be increases in problem substance use with youth. And what we do see, there was a 2020 article in JAMA Psychiatry that does show that in states that legalized recreational marijuana, underage youth use increased. I think that an approach to that could be, if we're going to save money in enforcing this, invest that money in public health. And we will work with our programs to address substance use and problem substance use with youth. We have done that in the past and we will continue to do that, but we can't do that if decriminalization takes place without putting funding and resources into public health. And then other than that, I'm just here to answer questions.
Great, thanks for that. Well, for not having something prepared, thank you for that insight. Okay, so next up, we have City Attorney Jim Nugent. Waiting for him to pop on with his camera. Right now, we see a lovely shot of your desk.
That's because I haven't set it up for me to be saying. Okay. My primary concern was the first time this was drafted, there was concern that it'd be decriminalizing. And that's a word that Montana state law doesn't allow local governments to decriminalize state laws. So that was the parameter that generated my concern. I all along have encouraged that the people who have concerns, if there are real, legitimate, any volume of concerns, they should be meeting with the police and the police chief to ascertain exactly what are the likely facts with respect to these matters. With respect to enforcement of state criminal laws, Montana state law does not allow a local government to give instruction, mandate a prioritization to law enforcement as to which laws, state laws, they are to enforce. That was, like I say, the touchstone that caused the concern. Also, practically speaking, and I'm not interested in taking any position on the pros and cons of any of this. I'm just trying to keep you within the sideboards or parameters of the legality in Montana. But practically speaking, this isn't going to affect agencies, plural, in Missoula. The city council resolution is only a policy statement, and it will not affect the sheriff within the city limits. It won't affect the county attorney within the city limits. And it's important to also note that the city government may not adopt any state laws or any resolution, local regulation that pertains to felonies. So if there was a felony involved, the resolution couldn't apply to anything involving a felony offense. In addition to the sheriff and the county attorney not being bound by this, the drug team task force are not bound by it. University security are not bound by it. The highway patrol are not bound by it inside the city limits. So in part, it might be giving a false sense of status or security with respect to what the actual situation is inside the city limits. And so just as a reality check, people need to realize that all these other entities, they're not bound or influenced in any way by the city council resolution. And that basically, the primary message was work with the police department, learn the real facts from the police department, and coordinate with the police department about addressing this in the future.
Great. Thanks so much for that background and information and sideboards. Okay, so I am not familiar with anybody else who's wanting to present or speak on this at the moment. So now we will move to the question portion of our committee meeting. So how the rest of it's going to go is we'll have questions from council members. If a motion gets made, we will then go to public comment on the motion, and then back to comment from council members per our new rules of how we're hosting meetings. If no motion is made, we will then have public comment opportunities for those who are willing to, who are wanting to provide comment. So now we will go to questions, and I'm going to go in the order of operations as you see, or as I at least see them on my side screen. And so the first hand up I have is Councilwoman Jordan.
Thank you. First of all, I'd like to make the recommended motion to adopt this resolution to address entheogenic plant practices in the city of Missoula. I'd also like to make some comments. For those of you
so Ms. Jordan, comments per our new council rules, comments on motions come after questions, public comment, and then we move to comments from council members. So it goes questions, public comment, council member comments. So you can make the motion, but we can't take comments on it. Trying to follow the new rules as we adopted them. So for order of operations, to make sure that we are taking everybody's questions into consideration as well as public comment into consideration before we make comments. So
I have some significant comments to make. I'm very frustrated. Thank you. I'll wait.
Okay. Don't mean to cut you off, just trying to do proper order of operations and want to give you an opportunity to make your comments. So for questions, we will have Ms. West.
So I have a couple of questions, and I'll save all my comments for later. I was wondering if there's any significant, if you knew if there are any significant differences in state law between the states that have cities that have adopted this resolution and Montana.
Great.
Does anybody have any?
Anybody want to volunteer to answer Ms. West's question?
I think if I may.
Yes, of course.
Okay. I think the one thing that Police Chief White and maybe Mr. Nugent mentioned earlier is that there was a state law that worked on prioritization issues. So I believe we worked to edit the document, so that was taken out. This is really more about where the resources go, and Mr. Barnett there said let's put some of those resources in the public health. I think that'd be great. I think this is a public health issue, not a criminal issue. We should really not be, we're talking about harms, and sending people to jail is much greater harm than these healing materials are. So I think that's something to consider. I know Montana is a little bit different in that regard. Some of these other states don't have that deprioritization restriction from state law. But I think we did a pretty good job, Councilmember Carlino and Mr. Nugent and others, to make the resolution so that it does fit within the parameters of the Montana state law.
Thank you. Then I have one more question, if I may.
Yes, but Mr. Nugent, I saw your hand. I don't know if do you want to provide comment on that question as well?
Heidi asked a good question on a topic like this because in all likelihood, there's 50 different state laws that address this type of topic. There is no cookie cutter state law that is being adopted and fit into all these situations. I'm not aware of anyone locally doing a comparison with what the other state laws are doing, but you can almost rest assured that in all the other states, there's laws that are different than what Montana's law is.
Thank you. And then my second question, I guess, is if there is any, infrastructure for therapeutic use of these substances in, I guess, in Missoula specifically at this time.
I would say in reference to that, because there's a different level of issue in terms of if you have a therapy license, you have to worry about losing your license or losing your insurance or things like that. Those infrastructures haven't been built yet. But it doesn't mean that there isn't a very strong community that's already been doing this research, that's been helping people out, have been creating support systems, bringing the education. We'll hear from them a little bit later on as well. Missoula team is doing a really good job of letting the community know about the risks and the benefits and how to do this in a good way. So I think that's something that will grow. Obviously, there's a risk reduction element to all this as well. A lot of those people won't necessarily want to become visible until the risk is reduced, and that starts with being able to change policy or reduce the risk in terms of arrests related to this issue. So yes, there is some great people out in Missoula that are working on this, and I think it will only develop from here on out. And I think also just one more point I want to make too is that cannabis is still federally legal, and we don't address that on the city or state level. So cannabis policy is shifted, even though federal policy is such, and also that we're not trying to change state law. We're just trying to say, hey, let's allocate these funds to places like public health or other places that don't put people in jail.
Great. Thanks so much for that. Ms. West, do you have any more questions?
No, not at the moment.
Okay, great. I'll move on. Next up, I have in the queue, Ms. Vasika.
Thanks. And I have two clarifying questions. The first one is the proper pronunciation of this. Is it entheogen or enthogen?
Entheogen.
Entheogen. Okay, thank you. And then the second one is for Chief White. When you're speaking about drug investigations, if there's a drug investigation and you come across these as well as other drugs, because the entheogens are there, will the investigation be stopped, or is it if only entheogens are found that the investigation will be stopped?
It's only if entheogens are the only substance.
Okay, thank you. That's all my questions for now.
Great, thanks so much. Next up, I have Mr. Nugent, Mike Nugent.
Thank you, Chairwoman Anderson. I have a couple questions, and starting first for Chief White, and I apologize if you touched on this. We keep hearing about reallocating funds. Is there a specific budget line item in the Missoula Police Department budget for investigating entheogenic plant crimes?
No, there is not.
Okay, good to know. And I'm curious, and this might be a question for Daniel first, and then follow up with Chief White. You referenced the demographics of minority incarceration and use statistics throughout Montana. Do we have any specific data on those as they relate to this particular offense?
There's no public data that is specifically for entheogens in Missoula or in Montana. Chief White would only provide us with 2 years worth of data. And out of the thousands and thousands of years that entheogens have been used in these lands, they've only been criminalized for the past 50 years. So we're really only getting about 4% or so of the sample size. So I would love to have that data, but it is concealed in the police department.
So to follow up on that, so you're kind of, that portion of your presentation really is highlighting another issue that we're facing in Missoula, Montana, but we can't with data specifically tie the racial inequity to this policy?
I guess like with the arrest data and people incarcerated, that would be relevant. But yeah, I was using marijuana as comparison because I know we have plenty of data for that. And I thought it would be the most comparable. But if you look at like all drug arrests, there's racial disparities. But I don't have the exact number for Missoula or for Montana.
Thanks. And I certainly recognize that on a national and state level in the data, but I was just curious more specifically for this. And that's all I have right now. Thanks.
Thanks so much. Chief White, did you want to respond to Mr. Mike Nugent's question on the demographics of arrests?
Yes, so if we were only asked to provide general numbers, we weren't asked to provide racial makeup of our arrests. That information we do have. The 3 cases that would apply under this resolution, 2 of them were white male adults, and the other one was a Native American juvenile.
Great. Thank you for that clarifying question or clarifying answer. Next up, I have Ms. Jones.
Thanks. This is a question for Deshane, our health officer. You referenced that in communities where marijuana is now being used medicinally and recreationally under the state legislatures, that youth use is going up. And could you just speak a little bit more to that? I think that's something that we should be paying attention to because we're having a huge rollout in Missoula, and I'm sure we're still gathering data, but just where are we at with that issue?
Yeah, so in that article, to make sure that this is very clear, Montana numbers are not included in that. This was a JAMA Psychiatry article that came out in 2020 that looked at recreational marijuana legalization in states between 2008 and 2016. So we know that Montana's legalization efforts didn't come until after that. But what this article found in looking at states that had legalized recreational marijuana during that time frame, there were increases in youth marijuana use, both in, there was a smaller increase in first-time use. There was a larger increase in youth who had used in the past year, and then reported use after the legalization of recreational marijuana. And so what we saw is that that same occurrence didn't happen in our older youth, 18 to 25. It happened in our younger youth, 12 to 17. And I think as adults, we've all been teenagers once, and we know that when something's cool, we want to do it, we want to try it. And when we're hearing about it and seeing it, there absolutely is the potential for something like this to become sensationalized. And in public health, we have been combating that against both illicit and legal substances since public health has existed. We in Missoula, we have underage drinking task force, we have nicotine task force. What this would do is potentially, if we saw an increase in our youth use of entheogenic plants and fungi, we would want to respond to that. We would want to address that. And in order to do that, we would need the support and the resources to do that. And so what I would want to see is just a very clear commitment. I think nationally, these efforts are moving forward. I think that we are living in an environment where, we're going to have to confront this eventually. And so, I think it was Dr. Norris who said, if we're going to do this, let's do it in a good way. And doing it in a good way means making sure that public health has the tools and the resources that we need, so that if there is a decriminalization, or I know Jim said we're not to use that word. So if there's if we're not enforcing, this, and if there is a corresponding increase in illicit use among youth who we do not want to see using this inappropriately, how are we ensuring that the tools and resources are there? But again, also in public health is the negative impacts of criminalization that disadvantage our marginalized communities. So how do we address both of those things? In public health, we struggle with this every day. How do we address both of those things? I don't have all the answers, but I would love to see all of the answers come to the table during this discussion.
Thank you.
Great. Next up, I have Mr. Nugent's hand up. Is that?
Yeah, I shouldn't have said I was done. I have a follow-up for Chief White, if that's okay.
Yes.
Chief White, you mentioned the 2 white males and one Native American of the 3 solely entheogenic plant arrests. Do you have any demographic information on the other 17? And then I have one more question on that, and then I really am done.
I'm sorry, I do not have information on the other 17.
Do you, on those other 17, do you have any information on what other charges were tied to those?
It ranges from everything from other dangerous substances to acts of violence. So wide variety of other crimes.
And of the 20 arrests between the 3 solely entheogenic and the 17, how many of those had an amount greater than the threshold for potential distribution?
That I do not know.
All right, thank you.
And just to clarify, Chief White, I think I want to make sure I heard that correctly. Of the 3 arrests, 2 of them were adult and one of them is juvenile. It was a native juvenile for that.
That is correct.
Okay, just wanted to make sure that I heard that correctly. Okay, great. I have no more in the queue, so I will ask my question now. My question is to Attorney Nugent in regards to, I wasn't on council at the time, but I know that several years ago, there was, before recreational and medical marijuana were legalized in Montana, specifically, there was efforts at the council level to attempt to do that. And I believe it got overturned. I would appreciate if you have the ability to shine some, to kind of tell us what the lessons learned or kind of from that period, and that, because right now, marijuana is legal in Montana, both medical and recreational. It started as medical and has moved recently to recreational. These substances are not legal in even a medical component at the state level.
So technically, Montana state voters have authorized, as you say, but that doesn't make it legal under federal law. Basically, federal law isn't being enforced by anyone at this particular level. More specifically, with respect to attempting to prioritize, making law enforcement prioritize their enforcement. There was the county resolution several years ago, and the voters did approve that, but the Missoula County Attorney Fred Van Valkenburg went to the Montana State Legislature and got the law passed that said that local governments could not prioritize the enforcement of criminal laws by law enforcement. In other words, local government can't give instruction to law enforcement as to what gets priority for enforcement purposes.
Great, thanks so much. That was what I was trying to get at. So this resolution is just prioritizing funding, but through funding, it's giving direction to Missoula Police Department on how to conduct their operations.
You would have to consult with the police chief. It's my understanding he earlier indicated there was no line item for funding this type of a matter, but as far as funding or how it might impact the financial aspects of the police department's budget, I would defer to the police chief. I wouldn't venture forward trying to explain his budget at all.
Great. I guess I appreciate that, Mr. Nugent, and would appreciate any clarification from Chief White. I guess I'm trying to figure out how this particular resolution sort of threads the needle between that state law that says municipalities cannot, dictate. And it seems as though the way around that seems to be a do not put any funding towards it. but there isn't specific funding directly tied to ethnogens. So I guess how is this legal to be able, to direct the Missoula Police Department to not prioritize this when there is no specific funding or task force specifically related to this?
So since there isn't a line item specific to this, that's a question I have myself, and we would have to dig deeper into that to see how that would actually function.
All right.
From a budgetary impact.
Got it. Okay. Appreciate that there is not clarity as of right now on that. I'll continue to move on with questions. Ms. Jones.
Thanks. I was just thinking there's something that we should pursue a little bit further. I understand, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, the intention of this is to not have people serving time in jail for possessing this substance. And the long game is not putting people in jail from compromised or marginalized factions of society, but having equal distribution of justice, if you will. So this is probably a question for the district attorney, but maybe the police chief can answer it. For those who are arrested in Missoula in the last few years, simply for entheogenic substances with no other charges, do you know how those cases have resulted? What the end result was in terms of the justice system?
I don't know how each individual case has been resolved, but there is a drug court that is available through district court. So anyone who is arrested for simple possession of dangerous substances, whether it be entheogenic or others, and there's a few other criteria, but we'll just generally speak about simple possession matters, are eligible for a diversionary program through the district court that is overseen by the district court. And it is a program that is rehabilitative in nature, and it helps people get through rehabilitation and get themselves healthy and back positively in the community. And it does not involve incarceration time. It defers the prosecution upon successful completion. So there are programs that currently exist in our community to address these issues.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so monitoring time and understanding we have a second presentation. Ms. West has her hand up. We'll give her the last question. We will move to public comment, and then we'll move to regular council comments.
Thank you. So I guess I have a two-part question. So if someone is arrested from these with just possession, what entity prosecutes that charge?
That is prosecuted by the Missoula County Attorney's Office.
Okay, which we can't control because they're county. And then my second question is, I guess as a policy body, we are one branch of government, and the judicial system is its own branch of government. And I was wondering, to the extent of which we can, I guess, legislate what the judicial branch does.
Mr. Nugent, would you like to weigh in on that?
Well, the city council could try to give direction to the judicial branch. There's no guarantee the judicial branch would adhere to the city council direction. There have been instances where the city council has indicated that the minimum fine should be X, and often the court might suspend the fine so it's not collected or not impose it at all. So there hasn't been great success with respect to city council trying to give direction to the judicial branch. They see themselves as quite an independent branch of government that can't be controlled by another branch of government. I guess in part you could say some of the city council ordinances gave some direction to the municipal court, but there's no guarantee that they have to follow what the city council has recommended or instructed.
Great, thanks for that. Okay, so Ms. Jordan very first kicked us off with making a motion. So that motion is in order and is on the floor. So we'll now move to public comment on the motion. And I have in the queue, Jonathan Peebleson, who should be unmuted. If you'd like to make a comment on this, and please try to keep it to 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, council members. My name is Jonathan Peebleson. I'd like to take a few minutes this morning to speak on behalf of the local chapter of Decriminalize Nature Montana and to share a few insights about why this resolution matters so much, both to me, to our team, and to Missoula and the surrounding communities. For years, myself personally, and for a year and a half, we have been working to build the understanding, the momentum, the resolve to bring this resolution to decriminalize entheogens into fruition. I'm an herbalist. This means I work directly with plants and fungi. I utilize many different perspectives and resources to do this work. Eastern perspectives, Western perspectives, and indigenous ones. And I've learned from my vocation, from formal education, apprenticeship, firsthand experience, and professional practice. My particular area of study is entheogens, consciousness, and healing the mind. But these plants are just a handful of hundreds, if not thousands, of plants and fungi that I have relationships with, which are my most direct relationships with Earth, with my health, and with my livelihood. I cultivate, propagate, wildcraft, and care for plants and provide food and shelter, material, and medicine from these plants. The most basic of our human needs are first met by plants and fungi. Secondly, I am an advocate. This means I work directly with people on their behalf to provide the disadvantaged or marginalized individuals in our community and abroad with education, empowerment, and ultimately with the skills and wisdom to grow community of intention and self-agency. I connect people with information, resources, and the connections necessary to improve their lives and well-being. And lastly, I'm a facilitator. This means I make things happen at the intersection where plants and people meet. I work with individuals and groups to design direct relationship with plants and fungi that will support healthy, robust, and resilient outcomes for themselves, for their community, for their relationships. The plants and fungi are powerful teachers. They can teach us right relation with ourselves, with our community, with the world at large. We are finding that they are real and really effective medicine allies, which we can have direct relationship with, and humans always have. They can provide us with consciousness medicine that is so very necessary at this time in the shared reality that we find ourselves in. So in closing, I implore that you act on behalf of our community, of human rights, and the right relationship with nature, and vote to affirm a resolution which decriminalizes these plants and fungi, as criminalization has been burdensome and onerous impact on individuals who are already marginalized, oppressed, undervalued, and underrepresented. Thank you.
Thank you so much for that public comment. Next up, we have Chester Chitez. Gosh, apologies for not pronouncing, I'm sure, that correctly. You should be able to unmute yourself and provide public comment.
I also have a question, but that's more of, do we know why they're taking meth? And beyond the public comment, I would have to say that there are dozens of podcasts regarding entheogenics and others psychedelics, including the MAPS podcast, including Alchemical Mind, and a few others. Plus, popular figures have been known to take it on occasion, both in the 1960s, beyond there, and every point up to now.
Great, thank you so much for that comment. Next up, I have Michelle Richaud.
Okay, thank you. I found the unmute button. Hello, thank you, Council, City Council, people of Missoula. As a Montana, I find it rather interesting that our current drug policy dictates how I can have a relationship with Mother Earth. I have received many benefits from my therapy that I overtook in Jamaica. I'm still receiving the benefits of the psilocybin therapy I underwent. And I hope that other people who are in similar circumstances will be able to enjoy the benefits of psilocybin therapy. And since I've been talking about it since 2019, 2020 actually, a lot of people from the community have come forward to me and said, I have been doing this annually, or I have had this experience, and it's that and your peers even, it was shocking to know a whole bunch of movers and shakers in Missoula who do this underground. And I kind of was a little upset because it took me a long time to find it. And I'm currently helping the Decriminalize Nature Montana efforts because of the education portion of the efforts. And I would hope that if passed, this referendum would increase the amount of knowledge to the community and allow them to know that there are alternatives rather than the pharmaceuticals that are in your backyard or just accessible through Grow, Gather, Gift. Thank you for listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you so much. And then finally, up in the public comment queue, we have Heather McConnell. You should be able to unmute.
Thank you. Afternoon, City Council members. My name is Heather McConnell. I am a resident residing in Ward 4 in Missoula. I just want to come forth and say that I am in full support of this resolution and that I, on a personal level, have experienced incredible healing benefits while interacting with entheogens of multiple types. I've experienced incredible healing within my direct community of friends and family members and even co-workers. Entheogens they're taking their spotlight in the clinical trial world, where they are experiencing tons of positive outcomes from entheogens of all types. And I think it's really important for us as a community to, this is just step one, is getting this passed. And I think it's really important for us as a community and for all communities to continue this level of dialogue if we want to continue to facilitate and bring about this kind of new paradigm of healing within our community and within our world at large. We've all recently experienced some pretty intense collective trauma, what with the whole coronavirus epidemic that is still kind of continuing even to this day. And I think that it's really important that we have a collective counter to that type of trauma. And step one is starting the communication, the conversation, and getting laws and resolutions in place that will help bolster this type of healing commodity. Thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Next up in the queue, we have Jonathan Thomas. You should be able to unmute and provide comment.
Oh, sorry. Hi, my name's John, and I just wanted to provide my support for this resolution. I'm an addictions counselor licensing candidate, and I've also looked into a lot of the research coming down from using these ethnogenic plants as addiction treatments. I've been following that closely, so I just wanted to support all that research that was discussed earlier. And I have also had clients in my own practice reveal that some of their experiences with these plants have helped them on the path to sobriety and recovery with various addictions to certain substances. Thank you.
Thanks so much. And then finally, we have Stefan. Oh, wait, there we go. Jumped around. Stefan Ferguson.
Yes, thank you. My name is Stephen Ferguson. I'm a licensed addiction counselor and a clinical social worker licensure candidate here in Missoula. As John just said, I've been following, I think for the last decade, kind of the national trend toward utilizing these substances in a therapeutic setting. And I think the research really goes to show for itself that there is a beneficial relationship that can be had with this if used in the appropriate setting, time, place, and circumstance. And, in reality, I think as we're looking at this, this is an inevitable end result. So whether it's now or whether it's 50 years from now, this is the societal trend that is going on in America right now. And so when you're looking at the legalization and you're looking at all of the data that goes behind the benefit that these plants have, I think it takes a closer look for sure. It sounds to me like this proposal doesn't have a lot of teeth in that it's not going to effectively change the actual rolling out of policy. As we've talked about, there's the issues involved with how it can affect kind of the county and the federal and everything else, the judicial branch and everything else. But I think what it does do is it allows Missoula to take a stance and say, are we interested in moving forward or do we want to stay in the past? And that's what I hear, is that this conversation and this connection that we're having right now isn't so much about how can we actually remove this obstacle, it's how can we talk our way through it and set a standard for future generations to be able to take this to the legislature and take this to a greater place and make those changes necessary so that on a state level, we begin to recognize the therapeutic value of this thing. So anyways, thank you for hearing me out. And I think that's all I have right now.
Great. Thanks so much. Okay, folks, we're not going to finish this item today because we need to move on to the next item. So we're going to hold this over in committee until I believe, I'll let you know, not next Wednesday, but the following Wednesday. I think it's like the 29th. But I want to be mindful of time and give that Ms. Jordan really wanted to have a presentation from Mr. Lakaiko on reentry. We are going to move on to that. So as purview of the chair, I'm going to hold this into committee. We will hear more of this in 2 weeks. So with that, we're moving on to the next item on our agenda, and I'll hand it over to the sponsor, Ms. Jordan.
Thank you, Ms. Anderson, and thank you for offering to table the previous issue, because I know there's still a lot of comments that and questions and things that people have. And I am really excited to introduce Benny Lakayo, who is a returning citizen who works with Welcome Back, that is a community that helps to give voices to the needs of folks who are returning from incarceration, to also help them learn how to, oh gosh, I'm forgetting my word, learn how to succeed in this environment and also become activists that help change narratives and provide opportunities for people who are returning citizens. And with that, I will turn it over to Mr. Lakayo, and let me know if I actually said your name wrong, because I think I said it right, but.
Yeah, thank you. First, I just want to say thank you for everyone to being here and allowing me to speak amongst y'all. And just to rephrase, my name is Benny Lakayo. Thank you. Before I start though, I want to give a real quick disclaimer, because it's working with returning citizens sometimes can be sensitive, because there's 9 times out of 10 someone that has been victimized, and although returning citizens, we are a marginalized group, I don't like to put down other marginalized groups to bring up my platform or whatever I'm working on, and also I'm not here to point fingers. I think collectively, all of us as a community need to be a part of this solution, and real quick, I would like to take a moment of silence, because there are people that have been victimized and been hurt by other community members, and those people that get victimized and stuff, have to deal with that the rest of their lives. And sometimes they're able to overcome it, and sometimes they're not. And so I just want to give them a moment prior to I speak. Thank you. I want to start out by saying first on how the system that we're currently in, our criminal system, is not designed for people that commit crimes to be accountable for their actions. And it separates the person that is victimized for them to get relief, for them to say, hey, I want to know why. You know, there's really little. Usually there's a separation. There's usually things that keep them apart. You know, I'm not going to talk about restorative justice, but I'm very big on that. You know, we're in a system that says you have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. The minute you are told that, your accountability level, I believe, lowers. You know, and also just dealing with returning citizens. One of the biggest things that I see that are wrong is them taking accountability. There's always an excuse. There's always something else. But you were in a system that's designed that if you don't advocate, or I don't want to say lie for yourself, you're going to get more time. If you're honest, you're going to get more time. So we're not put in a system that allows us to say, yes, this is what I did, and I want to move forward. You know, it really helps. It really doesn't help those to be enabled to move forward, you know? And so I'll speak a little bit about a specific situation because I want to shed a little light on what returning citizens go through and the stigma that is upon them and stuff, or upon us, because I'm also a returning citizen, you know. And I did have permission by this person to say their story. I'm going to keep all names out, even on the parole and probation side, because I know this parole officer personally. I believe they're a good parole officer and they're doing their best, but they're in a system that isn't designed to help returning citizens, you know. And a lot of that has to do with the training that they're given. They're being trained to be officers. They're being trained to, you know, police people rather than to try to help people return into society. And so this person was out on parole for a non-drug crime. During his time out on parole, for 3 months, they got into very serious drug addiction, methamphetamines to be exact. And during that 3 months, the parole officer would come and visit them and say, hey, you need to get your stuff together, because if you don't, you're going to end up in prison. And for 3 months, you're going to end up in prison. You're going to end up in prison. I don't want to put you in prison, you know? And then so there was an a new alleged crime that was supposedly that they committed. So they went to jail. They went to county jail here in Missoula County. They were there for 6 months. 6 months it took our system to say that alleged new crime was not a crime. It was just hearsay. But this person lost their job. This person, even though they were being in an active addiction, they were still working. They were, you know, going through the motions, so-called. And during that time, they lost their job. They lost their housing, everything, you know. And so after the 6 months of them being released from prison or from county jail, that person was homeless. There was no offer, because of supposedly there's this Mora rating that tells you how likely someone is to commit another crime. Because of his Mora being really high because of his drug use, they didn't want to send him to any inpatient treatment. They didn't give him a chance to say, this is what I need. And I spoke to this person and they said, I needed someone to reach out to me and reach out a hand. Because the way the system is created is, if you're going to succeed, it's based upon what you're going to do, not just how are other people going to help you to try to get to where you want to be, you know? And I don't want to put the blame on DOC the police department, P&P. My job is not here to do that. Or even some of the folks here on city council, while some of these things aren't things that we could fix at local level, possibly not. But if we come together as a community, as a one people, putting our, acknowledging our differences and celebrating those differences that we may have, but coming together as a people, because at the end of the day, we all bleed the same color, and this is a community issue. This is a people issue. If we could come together and organize to help and figure out how do we really solve these issues, and maybe we need a change of the whole judicial system, and how that goes, and become a more restorative justice style of working within the justice system. I believe this person wouldn't have had to gone through as much pain as they went through. There was, like I mentioned, because his mora was too high, they weren't going to help him. So they just threw him out on the street. And while he was there, he got, I'm sorry here. There was a assessment made by the Western Montana Addiction Services, and he's currently having treatment through Turning Point. And even during this, as this person has to do all this, these treatments, when they go to treatment, it's 9 to 5. There are no treatments that I know of, and correct me if I'm wrong, anyone, that are usually from 6 p.m. down. It's usually during the day. So this person's going to have to miss work once they find a job. And then there aren't jobs that want to take a lot of returning citizens that have to do treatment, because the treatments are during the day usually, And so because of this, the judge ordered that he do an outpatient intense treatment. And in that treatment, they have to pay for the treatment. And they told them if Medicare could pick it up, and he has no way of applying. And when he applied, he got denied because all his paperwork wasn't in order. So we're talking about someone that's homeless, that they have to have all their ducks in order, then they have to take a random drug test at least once a week. Then that test costs $60. So minimal every month, this person is paying $280 plus the treatment cost that we don't know what that is yet, plus $21 a month for supervision fees. Then if there's any restitution, if there's any court fees, and all this stuff piles up and piles up and piles up, and it makes it very difficult to want to succeed. I don't know how many times I've heard returning citizens, I might as well just go back to prison. The system is not helping me. It's not designed to help me. And to be honest, I've been there myself. I've been there myself a few times, especially trying to find a job. And then at every time you go to a job, especially depending on the crime you have, you got to reopen those wounds and talk about those crimes you committed, and have people look at you and gawk at you, and then end up not even hiring you. So there are a lot of stuff that someone that it has been incarcerated or has drug disorder, and even how we speak and how we talk about returning citizens, it's hurtful. We're called, the names that they use for us are offenders. Felon, you are a felon. No, I committed a felony, sir, but my name is Benny Lacayo. Yes, I offended, but I am no longer an offender. And we use these terms a lot that really do not enforce someone to want to be or have them increase in good behaviors and good understandings. So Welcome Back has noticed that, and Welcome Back sees that. And so I'm going to talk real briefly about Welcome Back, and I'm going to share my screen. Hopefully I could do this right. Okay, I'll use my desktop. Okay. Just a second here. Wrong button. All right, cool. So this is welcome back. And this is what we do. You know, move this real quick. Welcome Back strives to change community attitudes towards people who have a history of incarceration by working to break down barriers to housing, employment, and social support. Our mission is to take away the lifelong consequences of those who have made bad choices and connect them with the resource they need to move forward in the community as productive members of society. You know, and as I mentioned about the stigma, how we talk to returning citizens, how we speak about returning citizens, we speak about them as their crime, we speak of them as subhuman. And when you're incarcerated, you become subhuman, you know. And even I, prior to my incarceration, I wasn't really like involved in gang life or that type of activity, you know. And I think because of that, you know, because someone asked me, how is it after being incarcerated 2.5 years, you're able to do or be where you're at today? And I'm going to go into that more in a bit. You know,
I'm sorry, but I just wanted to flag for you that your screen has changed and we're not seeing
Correct.
the presentation in full screen. We can
Correct.
see some of your desktop, which I don't know if you necessarily want to be airing to the entire world.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I was going to show another document about how.
Sorry about that.
Yeah, no problem. I appreciate your concern though. Thank you. Because I am not the best with technology. Okay. Out of this article here, it talks about returning citizens and the recidivism. And the last time I think it was in 2017 or 2014, over 40% of people that were incarcerated is recidivism, 40%, you know. And in this article, it says here, prisoners, parolees, probationers face a unique set of health disparity challenges on either side of the criminal justice system. National studies show that people who enter the system often bring chronic health conditions, high rates of infectious disease, untreated mental illnesses, and substance. You see, it says substance abuse problems. A lot of this, even though this is trying to help returning citizens and stuff, you know, just how we look, we say a lot of people say substance abuse, you know, when it's, you know, instead of looking at it from a medical side and saying, hey, there's a disorder here, you know. And then I'm going to go down a little bit here. Let's see here. So studies focused mostly on urban parolees have shown that they typically live in areas with the service providers they need to get their lives back on track, such as health clinics, mental health counseling, drug testing, once again, substance abuse treatment, when it's to say substance, you know, disorder. And then it goes on to saying Montana's rural setting, however, those providers may be far and few between, with possible consequences to a parolee's health and reentry to society. In Montana, 40% of people released from prison are back within 3 years. You know, and we could blame that on the person, or we could all take a little bit of responsibility as a community on how we're going to be there and help each other and help those that are, you know, the families that are affected by this. Because the fact of the matter is, once you get out of prison, you know, even then when you get out of prison, you don't stop doing your time. Your time keeps following you. It follows you in your job. It follows you in your lifestyle. Wherever you go, there's no end, really. There are so many people that end up living life sentences because of the way our system is the way we deal with things, and the way our system is built. Okay. And so here at Welcome Back, we build power amongst individuals and families impacted by incarceration who want to create the kind of community where returning citizens are given all the tools and support they are needed to learn, grow, and move on, you know. And then so this part of Welcome Back, the organizing part, is what's helped me be here today and stand in the gap for those that are currently incarcerated and for those that are returning citizens out in our community, you know. And I've learned a lot. I've learned a lot from this. It's even changed the way I see, the way I look at law enforcement, because it's all the way I've been before. It was us against them, you know. Even though we're in the same community, you know, we drink the same water, we eat the food from the same stores. It was always me against them, you know. And because of organizing, it showed me that instead of building walls, let's build bridges, and let's come together as a community to overcome these obstacles. And, let me see here. No, that's probably okay. And like I mentioned, we want, as we engage with local government and private organizations and community-wide awareness events and strategies in order to break down the stigma and discrimination associated with incarceration, you know. And I would love to build a relationship with our local police department, you know, and even a better relationship with PMP, because PMP does know about Welcome Back, and they have sent us people to be a part of Welcome Back, you know. So I appreciate that. That's why I don't feel I want to just talk badly about how sometimes PMP is treating returning citizens, because a lot of it is based on the training that they're given, and they're trained to talk to us a certain way. They're trained to act with us a certain way, you know. And the way it is set up right now, it keeps us divided, and there's walls. And so we want to build bridges, and we don't want to destroy them. You know, as when I started organizing, I was in some city council meetings, and when I felt a certain way about certain things, I got very upset and very hostile, I should say, you know. And since those early meetings, and now, because of me organizing, the way I interact is a lot different, you know. As a matter of fact, when I was done with one of those meetings, my mentor at the time was Casey Dunning. He was the lead organizer with Common Good Missoula. And he said, hey, you need to remember, these people have families, their fathers, their mothers, their uncles, their aunts. You know, there's people that care about them, just like you care about the things you care about, you know. So he kind of encouraged me that when I'm in public settings, you know, how to talk better, so I'm not talking down to people, but, you know, still having my voice and not losing my power, you know. And like I mentioned, because of that and being involved in some of these stuff, like I said, my outlook on law enforcement has changed a bit. Okay, at this point, because of COVID, we're not entering in MSP, but what we were doing here was trying to connect with returning citizens that were going to come to Missoula that maybe had 6 months to go, maybe even 3 months. And so that when they come to Missoula, you know, there's some type of support, possibly try to help them with finding housing, try to help with job support, because I also work with with Missoula Works, and we hire people that have previously been incarcerated. And there have been times where people get out of prison and they're like, yeah, I've been sent here by PMP, I need a job, but I'm also homeless too, you know. And I have seen PMP try to help people find housing and stuff like that, but we need to do something on a bigger scale. And then here, We try to build community. We have a potluck every third Thursday of the month, which is this Thursday. And then, and so we want to try to build community within returning citizens and non-returning citizens. Everyone is welcome at Welcome Back. It's not just for returning citizens, because I believe for us to build bridges with the community, we need to invite the community into our world and into the things that we do. And I'm not sure exactly how much time I took, but if anyone has any comments or questions.
Great. Thank you so much for that presentation and the work that you're doing within our community. We'll note that we have gone over time for today, but want to give, if you need to hop off, understand. We're going to go another minute or two if there's any questions. This is an informational presentation, so no motion, but we can do questions or comments. If you need to go because we are over committee, I understand. So next I will, Ms. Jordan has her hand raised.
Thank you. Hey, Benny, awesome. Thank you. Can you just tell everybody real quick about the reentry simulation coming up?
Oh, yes. Thank you. Okay. So, we have a few things real quick. I'll get to the simulations since we're done with time. On June 27th, we're going to have a reentry simulation where I would love if maybe the police department could be there as far as involved in it. And what that is you're going to become someone that is within the system that's either has a felony or some type of conviction, and you're going to have a card basically, and you're going to have to process yourself through the day of all the obstacles that someone that is a returning citizen has to go through. And the point is to not go to jail at the end of the day. And that is going to be June 27th. And there's going to be two of them. The early one, I think, is almost full from 3 to 5, but you're still more welcome to come and watch. And then there's going to be another one at 6:30 to 8:30. And this is going to be at St. Paul's off of 202 Brooks. And then there's going to be one more event, June 28th from 6 p.m. to 8 p.m. There's going to be a panel discussion talking about decriminalization of poverty. It's going to be at the University Center, Theater 32, Campus Drive. And also one last thing, on June 21st at the Roxy, we're showing a Father Boyle movie. And Father Boyle is going to be in town for some of those events. And there will be a quick discussion, like a talk back about local stuff that are happening within returning citizens.
Great. Thanks for all of those events. Mr. Carlino, and also if anyone in the audience attendees is going to want to make public comment, please tee up now so we can quickly move through.
Yeah, thanks, Benny, for all this important work. I guess I'm just curious what you think, besides being like outspoken advocates, if you think there's something that the city council should be proactively doing to try and help with returning citizens. And this might be like an ongoing back and forth dialogue with you all, but I just think criminal justice reform is something that frankly, I don't think the council or city's very good at, and I would love to see us be better. And I think there's a want to be better. So do you have anything like off the top of your head that we should be working on besides being good outspoken advocates?
At this time, what I see is beneficial would be involvement, not just from a distance, and I'd be more than glad if anyone would like to come to Welcome Back and visit with us. We are in need of folks that want to be help other returning citizens, whether by being a housing advocate or being a peer support. A lot of it comes down to support. If I didn't have a group of people behind me that I could console and speak to, I would be back in prison because of the stresses that I've had to deal with. And not because I want to commit a new crime, but just because of the current stresses that I deal with. But yeah, involvement, open more discussions, having some talks on what can be done or how we could do it, that would definitely be awesome, and show returning citizens that, hey, the community does care, and that's another thing, is the support from the community. We come back to, well, people don't want us there. People don't like us, and be a little bit more inclusive with us, that, hey, we're not all bad. The majority of us want to do good, but there's a lot of pressures that it makes it very difficult.
Great, thanks so much for that. Final two questions are Ms. Jones and Mr. Nugent.
Just super quick, I had a comment. Thank you so much for coming today. And I did want to highlight a couple of years ago, Michelle Cares, another city councilor, and I did do the reentry simulation, and it was amazing. And I was incredibly stressed out, and it was horrible in a good way, because it's a really good exercise to do. And if counselors can do it, I'd highly recommend that, because it's just a simulation, not the real thing. And boy, it makes you realize how difficult it is. We do have a huge meeting the night of June 27th for City Council. So, but if you can go watch, it's great. The other thing is, I heard Father Boyle talk about 25 years ago in Los Angeles, and it was an amazing talk. And I'm going to really try and hit that movie. And I was going to ask Kristen if you could maybe send an email out to all council, kind of highlighting, we get too many emails, so maybe kind of like putting that in front of us again. I just put it on my calendar as I was sitting here. I'm going to try and hit the Roxy that night. Really, really good to do. Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Great. Thanks so much. And Mr. Nugent.
Thanks. I just had a quick comment too. I just wanted to say thank you so much for this presentation, and thank you, Councilwoman Jordan, for setting it up. Working in housing, I think a lot of people who aren't directly paying attention to helping these citizens return into society don't understand the barriers. And I appreciate that we're talking about it. I think that the work that you and somebody like you are doing is so important, because if we believe that people who go to prison and do their time are rehabilitated and should be part of society, we need a place for them to go. And so many of the things I feel like we talk about on council all interrelate to things such as this, where we just don't have a good system. And I know that the city council might not be the best place to fix it, but I do appreciate talking about it, and I'm looking forward to engaging a bit more.
Awesome, thank you.
Great, thanks so much. Appreciate everyone's patience for going over and the substantive discussions. Like I said, we will pick up the resolution on ethnogens. Oh gosh, now hope I'm saying it right. On Wednesday, the 29th, in the next Public Safety and Health, and we'll kind of pick up where we left off. With that, thank you, Ms. Jordan and Mr. Lakago for coming and presenting and the work that you're doing. And thank you all for your service. And we'll see you in public or parks conservation, and I know I'm missing something, next committee meeting. Thank you, everyone. We will stand adjourned.